They bulldozed my family's farmland for their fancy community garden, never realizing I had documents proving I owned the entire county. What would you do if you discovered the ultimate power to make your entitled HOA neighbors pay? Comment below where you're watching from. The sound of a car door slamming jerked me awake from my afternoon nap on the porch. I opened my eyes to see a woman in a crisp white pantsuit marching up my gravel driveway, her heels sinking slightly with each determined step. My old farm dog, Bruno, gave a half-hearted woof before settling back down. "Excuse me. You there?" she called out, waving a bright yellow piece of paper. "Are you the owner of this property?" I slowly stood up, stretching my back after a long morning of fixing irrigation pipes. "Yes, ma'am. James Miller. My family's owned this farm for 3 generations. How can I help you?" She looked me up and down, clearly unimpressed by my mud-stained jeans and work boots. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Sunny Meadows Homeowners Association. This is an official notice of violation." She thrust the paper toward me. I took it, genuinely confused. My 600 acres of farmland had been here, long before the fancy new Sunny Meadows. Development had sprung up across the road last year. "Violation? Ma'am, I'm not part of your HOA." Karen's perfectly lined lips curved into what I guess she thought was a smile. "Your eyesore of a barn is clearly visible from several of our premium view properties. It's decreasing our home values by an estimated 15%. I glanced over at my grandfather's barn. Sure, the red paint was peeling in spots, but it was still solid and did its job just fine. This barn has stood here since 1937. And now it's 2025, Mr. Miller. Times change. We expect it to be painted or removed within 30 days. She pointed to the paper in my hand. It's all outlined there, along with the potential fines. I felt my temper rising but kept my voice steady. "I think there's been a mistake. Your HOA rules don't apply to my property." Karen's face hardened. "We'll see about that. By the way, what exactly are you growing over there?" She pointed toward my east field where my wheat was just starting to come up. "Winter wheat, same as always." She made a note on her phone. "Interesting. The board will want to know about this." Without another word, she turned and click-clacked back to her shiny SUV. I watched her drive away, then looked down at the violation notice. It had an official-looking stamp and threatened a $200 daily fine. At the bottom was a sticky note that read, "We should discuss the east section. Call me, K." I crumpled the paper and tossed it into my pocket. These city folks moving to the edge of town always thought they could push us farmers around. I had real work to do. That evening, while I was making dinner, my phone rang. It was Rick Thompson, my childhood friend who now worked as the county clerk. "Jimmy, you sitting down?" Rick's voice sounded stressed. "What's up? Snake in your office again?" I laughed, remembering the time a garden snake had sent Rick jumping onto his desk. "I wish. Listen, something weird just happened. Karen Whitfield from that new development came in with some documents about your east field. She was filing permits." I stopped stirring my chili. "Permits for what?" "A community garden, swimming pool, and tennis courts. Jimmy, she's claiming that section of your land actually belongs to their development. Says it was never properly surveyed when your grandfather bought the adjoining parcels." "That's ridiculous." "I have the deeds in my filing cabinet right now." Well, she had papers too. "Something looks off, but they were stamped and filed correctly. They're scheduled to start clearing land tomorrow morning." I nearly dropped the phone. "Tomorrow? They can't just bulldoze my wheat. I've got almost 50 acres planted there." I tried to slow it down, but she had all the right signatures. "Something's not right, Jimmy. You better find those deeds tonight." After hanging up, I rushed to my office, really just a corner of the living room, where I kept the farm paperwork. I pulled out the metal filing cabinet. My father had meticulously organized before he passed. My fingers shook slightly as I flipped through the folders. There it was, the original deed from 1937, plus the additional parcels my grandfather had purchased in the 40s and 50s. As I spread them out on the kitchen table, studying the property lines, everything looked in order, exactly as it had been for decades. The east field was clearly within our boundaries. But then I noticed something. The newest survey, done just 5 years ago when I had considered selling a small parcel, but ultimately decided against it, showed a slight discrepancy in the eastern border. Nothing major, just about 15 feet difference from the original survey. I had ignored it at the time, thinking it was just more accurate modern equipment. Could Karen have somehow used this tiny discrepancy to claim more of my land? I called Rick back, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried the sheriff's office. "Sheriff Davis speaking." "Sheriff, it's James Miller out at Miller Farm. I think someone's planning to illegally bulldoze part of my wheat field tomorrow morning." There was a long pause. Jimmy. "Yeah, I got a call about that today. Sounds like there's some property line dispute with that new development." "It's not a dispute, Sheriff. They're trying to steal my land. Now, Jimmy, let's not throw around accusations. Tell you what, I'll come out first thing tomorrow and make sure everything's legal before any machinery moves. I thanked him and hung up, feeling slightly better. Sheriff Davis had gone to school with my dad. He'd make sure things were handled fairly. As the sun set over my fields, I sat on my porch watching the lights come on in the big houses across the road. What was Karen really after? The east field wasn't even visible from their development. Then it hit me. Water rights. My property controlled access to Carson Creek, which ran through the back end of my land. The development had been having water pressure problems all summer. I'd overheard complaints at the general store. Were they trying to get access to the creek? I couldn't sleep that night. Instead, I dug through more paperwork, finding documents my grandfather and father had saved. Around 3 a.m., I found something interesting. A county map from 1962 showing that my family didn't just own this farm, but had once owned most of the land in a 30-mile radius, including where Sunny Meadows now stood. We'd sold parcels off over the years as farming became less profitable, but I wondered what other rights we might still hold. Water rights? Mineral rights? Access easements? Just before dawn, I dozed off at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. The sound of heavy machinery jolted me awake. I ran outside in my socks to see 3 bulldozers rumbling down the access road toward my east field. Karen's SUV led the way, and behind the bulldozers came several other cars with the Sunny Meadows HOA logo. Where was Sheriff Davis? I grabbed my phone to call him again, but before I could dial, the first bulldozer crashed through my fence line and into my wheat field. The sound of engines jolted me, awake at 5:30 a.m. Not tractors, these were heavier, louder machines. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, and threw on my boots. Something was very wrong. I raced outside in my pajamas to find 3 massive yellow bulldozers tearing up my wheat field. The golden stalks my family had carefully planted were being ripped from the ground and pushed into piles like trash. My stomach dropped. Those wheat plants were supposed to feed hundreds of people. "Hey, stop!" I shouted, running toward them, waving my arms. The operators couldn't hear me over the roaring engines. Then I spotted them. Karen Whitfield and 5 other people in matching blue Sunny Meadows HOA polo shirts, standing by a white SUV at the edge of my property. They were all sipping coffee from matching travel mugs, watching the destruction like it was a fun morning show. I stormed over, mud splashing on my pajama pants. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "This is my land." Karen turned slowly like she was surprised to see me on my own property. Her perfect blonde bob didn't move an inch as she tilted her head. "Good morning," she said sweetly, as if we were meeting for coffee. "We're finally addressing the neighborhood eyesore situation." The board voted unanimously. I pointed at the bulldozers. "Tell them to stop right now. Those are my crops." Karen sighed like I was a child who didn't understand basic math. "Actually, according to county records, this section was never properly registered to your family. It's been designated as community land for decades." She pulled a folder from her designer tote bag and flipped it open to show me a property map with lines drawn in red marker. My land had been split in half. "That's impossible," I said. "My grandfather bought this entire 600 acres in 1937. I have the deeds." "Well, these are the official records." Karen smiled, closing the folder before I could really look at it. "We're creating something beautiful here. A community garden with raised beds, a meditation labyrinth, and a koi pond. Property values will rise at least 8% once this mess is gone." The man beside her, who I recognized as Doug Wilson from the neighborhood marketing brochures, nodded eagerly. "We've already sold sponsorship benches to 15 families. Construction starts next week." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called the sheriff's office. While it rang, I watched in horror as the bulldozers pushed deeper into my field, destroying more of my crops with each passing second. "You can't do this!" I shouted at Karen over the noise. "This is theft and destruction of private property." "It's progress," she corrected, turning to say something to a woman taking notes on an iPad. They all laughed. Sheriff Davis finally answered on the 4th ring, and I frantically explained the situation. "They're destroying my crops right now!" "I need officers here immediately." There was a long pause on the line. "I understand you're upset," the sheriff said carefully, "but from what I'm seeing in the system, this appears to be a civil property dispute. We can't intervene without a court order." "What?" "They're trespassing and destroying my property." "According to the records I'm looking at," Sheriff Davis said slowly, "the property lines are unclear. I'd suggest contacting your lawyer." Something about his hesitation made my skin crawl. Sheriff Davis had known my family for years. Why was he suddenly acting like we were strangers? "I'll come by later to take a report," he added, then hung up before I could argue. When I looked up from my phone, Karen was watching me with a satisfied smile. She knew exactly how this conversation had gone. "Everything okay?" she asked innocently. "The sheriff is coming," I lied, trying to sound confident. Karen's smile didn't waver. "Wonderful. He can see our permits." She handed me a stack of official-looking papers, all approved by the county last month. "We tried to tell you about this at the neighborhood meeting, but you never attend, do you?" "Because I don't live in your neighborhood," I shouted, feeling my face get hot. "I've lived on this farm my entire life. My grandfather built that barn with his own hands in 1932, and it's been pulling down property values ever since," said Doug, checking his watch. "We have another meeting at 9. Will you be okay here, Karen?" "Perfectly fine," she assured him. As the other board members drove away, Karen turned back to me. "I understand change is difficult, but progress is inevitable. The suburbs are growing, and frankly, farming doesn't fit the community vision anymore." I watched in stunned silence as a bulldozer ripped through the irrigation system my father had installed 30 years ago. Pipes burst, spraying water into the air. "That's enough for today," Karen called to the operators, checking her watch. "We'll continue tomorrow." The bulldozers backed up, leaving deep tracks in my ruined field. 6 acres of wheat, nearly a fifth of my year's income, was completely destroyed. "This isn't over," I said, my voice shaking with rage and shock. Karen placed a hand on my shoulder. I jerked away. "It actually is," she said, "but we're willing to be reasonable. If you voluntarily surrender the remaining disputed acreage, we won't bill you for today's land clearing services." She turned and walked to her car, pausing to supervise, as workers hammered a huge sign into my soil. "Future home of Sunny Meadows Community Gardens and Wellness Center." As Karen drove away, I noticed Rick Thompson's truck speeding down my driveway. He jumped out, face pale with shock. "I just heard." "I came as soon as I could," he said, staring at the destruction. "This is insane. How could they possibly get permits for this?" "Someone at the county office helped them," I said, a cold realization settling in my gut. "But who would do that? And why?" Rick shook his head. "I don't know, but there's something else. On my way here, I saw surveyors at your north field. They had Sunny Meadows logo on their truck. My blood went cold. They're not stopping with just this field. We need to figure out how they falsified those property records," Rick said. "This isn't just about your farm anymore. If they can do this to you, they could do it to anyone," I finished, staring at the destroyed field. Back in my house, I went straight to my grandfather's old study. Behind a painting of our farm, there was a small safe I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the original property documents, deeds, surveys, and maps dating back to when my great-grandfather first settled this county. What I found made my hands shake with both fury and determination. Karen and the HOA had no idea who they were really messing with, and by this time tomorrow they'd regret ever setting foot on my land. I couldn't sleep. The image of bulldozers tearing up my wheat field kept flashing in my mind. At dawn, I got dressed and called Rick. "I need every document on the Oak Ridge Estates development," I told him. "Birth certificates to building permits, everything." "That could take weeks," Rick said. "I need it by noon." 3 hours later, I was buried in county records at Rick's office. My coffee was cold, but I barely noticed. My hands trembled as I flipped through dusty folders from the 1920s. "Found something," Rick called from his computer. "The original land survey from when your great-grandfather parceled out the county, and look who signed off on it." The signature at the bottom made my heart race. "Judge William Whitfield, Karen's great-grandfather," Rick confirmed. He knew exactly where the property lines were supposed to be. My phone buzzed with a text. The HOA was holding an emergency meeting tonight to discuss Phase 2 of their community project. More of my land was at risk. Back home, I pulled a heavy trunk from my attic. It was filled with my grandfather's papers. Inside, I found a leather folder with gold lettering. County water rights. Notarized. I read it 3 times to be sure. The water lines that fed the entire Oak Ridge Estates ran directly through my property. My family had granted an easement with strict conditions. My hands shook as I called my old college roommate, Sandra, now a lawyer in the city. "How fast can you get here?" I asked. "What's wrong?" she said. "I'm about to go to war with 200 angry homeowners." The Sunny Meadows HOA meeting room was packed when I arrived that evening. I spotted Karen at the front, wearing a crisp blue blazer with the HOA logo, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She tapped her manicured nails impatiently while waiting for everyone to settle. I slipped into a seat in the back row. Nobody noticed me. "As you can see from these beautiful renderings," Karen said, pointing to colorful posters, "Phase 2 will convert another 10 acres of that unsightly farmland into our new tennis complex and walking trails." The crowd clapped politely. A man in golf clothes stood up. "What about the farmer who lives there? Won't he complain?" Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Our legal team has confirmed that land was improperly registered decades ago. It rightfully belongs to our community now. My blood boiled, but I kept my face calm. I waited for the right moment. With the tennis complex, our property values should increase by at least 15%. Karen continued smiling. We've already hired the bulldozers for next Monday. When she finally opened the floor for comments, I slowly made my way to the microphone. The room quieted as people turned to look at me. Good evening, I said. I'm the farmer whose land you bulldozed yesterday, and whose land you're planning to take on Monday. Karen's smile tightened. Sir, this is a private HOA meeting. Before you continue with your plans, I said calmly, I'd like to introduce myself properly. My name is James Miller. My great-grandfather founded this county in 1901. Our family has farmed here for over a century. I opened my folder and placed my first document on the projector. It was a yellowed map showing the original county divisions. This is the original land survey signed by Judge William Whitfield in 1922. Does that name sound familiar, Karen? Her face flushed. Several board members whispered to each other. Your great-grandfather personally verified our property lines, I continued, which makes it interesting that you claim my land was improperly registered. I switched to the next document. Our family trust still owns the mineral and water rights to every inch of land in a 30-mile radius, including under your homes. The crowd murmured nervously. That's simply not possible, Karen snapped. Our development has all proper. I've spent today with county officials, I interrupted, my voice still even. It seems your HOA has been operating without proper authorization for years. Your water supply runs through my land, on easements that can be revoked with 30 days' notice. An older man stood up. Are you threatening to cut off our water? I'm stating facts, I replied. Just like it's a fact that your development was built on a conditional land use agreement that requires maintaining a 200-acre agricultural buffer zone. The very land you bulldozed yesterday and plan to bulldoze Monday. Karen stepped forward, her face red. We have documentation. Forged documentation, came a voice from the door. Everyone turned to see Sheriff Davis walking in, followed by Rick and 3 county officials. Rick carried a large cardboard box labeled evidence. This meeting is now part of a formal county investigation, the sheriff announced. We have reason to believe property records were deliberately falsified. Chaos erupted. Homeowners shouted questions. Karen tried to regain control but was drowned out. The vice president of the HOA, a tall man named Doug, grabbed the microphone. This is ridiculous. We followed every legal process. Sandra stepped forward from behind the sheriff. Then you won't mind explaining why the permit applications for your community garden project were backdated and signed by a county clerk who retired 3 years ago. People gasped. All eyes turned to Karen, who was frantically texting on her phone. Or why, Sandra continued. The property maps, submitted to the county, don't match the official surveys from any year. Since 1937, a woman with a baby stood up. Are we going to lose our homes over this? That's not my goal, I said, looking directly at her. But the destruction of my family's land has to stop, and the people responsible need to be held accountable. Karen suddenly pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Sheriff Davis nodded to a deputy who stepped in front of the door. Mrs. Whitfield, the sheriff said, we'll need you to stay for questioning. I gathered my documents, watching as frightened homeowners surrounded board members, demanding answers. This wasn't just about my land anymore. These people had been lied to as well. As I turned to leave, Doug grabbed my arm. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he hissed. Karen's husband is a state senator. This little stunt will cost you everything. I gently removed his hand. I'm not the one who bulldozed someone else's property based on forged documents. Outside, the night air felt cool on my face. I leaned against my truck, suddenly exhausted. This victory would be short-lived. Karen had connections and money. The real fight was just beginning, and she would come back harder than ever. My phone rang. It was Rick. You need to get back to your farm right now, he said, his voice urgent. Something's happening at your house. I jumped in my truck and sped home, heart pounding. As I crested the hill overlooking my property, I saw flashing lights, fire trucks, police cars, and in the distance, orange flames licking up the side of my century-old barn. They had hit back faster than I expected. I woke up to the sound of a drone buzzing over my farmhouse. Jumping out of bed, I grabbed my binoculars just in time to spot Karen, herself controlling it from the edge of my property. She was mapping more of my land. For 3 straight weeks after the county meeting, the Sunny Meadows HOA had been attacking me from every angle. They'd frozen me out of local businesses. The grocery store owner suddenly couldn't order my favorite coffee. The hardware store claimed they were out of the tractor parts I needed. I wasn't going to let them win. Not after what they did to my wheat field. When I drove into town that morning, people stared at me. A flyer was posted on the community board. Emergency HOA meeting, addressing the Farmland menace. My farm, where I grew food that fed half the county, was now being called a menace. "Don't let it get to you," said Rick, handing me a coffee as I entered his office at the county building. "I've been digging through old records all night. You won't believe what I found." He spread a yellowed map across his desk. It showed property lines from 1937, with my grandfather's signature in the corner. "According to this," Rick said, pointing to fine print at the bottom, "your grandfather included a special clause when he sold the original plots where Oak Ridge Estates now stands. No development can alter the natural watershed. The moment they bulldozed your field, they violated that clause." My phone rang. It was Maria Gonzalez, an Oak Ridge resident I'd met at the farmer's market. "They've cut off our water," she said, panic in her voice. "The HOA is claiming there's contamination from your farm. We have children and elderly people with no water." "That's impossible," I said. "Your water comes from the county supply." "Not according to the notice they put on our doors. It says we now need to buy bottled water from the HOA. Office at $20 per gallon until the farm contamination is resolved." I hung up, my blood boiling. Karen wasn't just coming after me anymore. She was using me as an excuse to profit off her own neighbors. When I got home, I found surveyors on another section of my property. Doug Wilson, the new HOA president, stood watching with his arms crossed. Karen had been forced to step down, but was clearly still pulling the strings. "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "We have new documentation," Doug insisted, flanked by 2 security guards with Sunny Meadows patches. "This parcel was rezoned in 1997. It belongs to the community now." I studied their faces. These weren't professional surveyors. These were HOA board members pretending to be officials. "I'll give you exactly 1 minute to get off my land," I said. "Or what?" Doug smirked. "Your threats were recorded at the meeting. The sheriff's on our side now." Little did they know I'd been recording too. Every word, every threat they'd made. That night, the local news van pulled up to my farm. I'd called in a favor from an old school friend who was now a reporter. "We're investigating reports that the Sunny Meadows HOA has cut off water to its own residents," she said on camera, "and claims of illegal land seizure." I showed her the bulldozed field, the fake surveyor's stakes, and most damning of all, the water bills residents had been paying compared to actual county rates. The story aired at 6 p.m. By 7, my phone was ringing nonstop. Oak Ridge residents were furious, not at me, but at Karen and the HOA. The next morning, I watched from my kitchen window as county water trucks arrived at Oak Ridge Estates. Rick had arranged emergency water delivery for the families affected by the HOA's scheme. Then something strange happened. A moving truck pulled up to Karen's house. Were they leaving? Had our pressure finally worked? My celebration was short-lived. That afternoon, I received notice that the HOA had filed a lawsuit against me, claiming my farm was causing environmental damage and reducing property values. They wanted $2 million in damages plus immediate seizure of all my land. I sat at my kitchen table, hands shaking as I read the lawsuit. This wasn't just about a community garden anymore. Karen and her cronies wanted everything. That's when I noticed something odd about the lawsuit paperwork. The attorney's firm was Whitfield Holdings LLC, Karen's own company. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was personally profiting from this fight. I called Rick immediately. "I need access to all property transactions in Oak Ridge Estates for the past 5 years." What we discovered left us speechless. Karen and 3 board members had been buying properties throughout Oak Ridge at below market prices whenever a homeowner violated HOA rules. They'd created the rules specifically to force people out. And the community garden? It wasn't just about spiting me. The land they bulldozed sat directly above a natural spring, the most valuable water source in our drought-prone county. I called an emergency town meeting at the county courthouse. Every resident of Oak Ridge Estates attended, along with farmers and townspeople from throughout the county. Standing before them, I revealed everything: the water price gouging, the property scheme, and most importantly, the water rights grab. "Your HOA has been charging you triple the normal water rates for years," I explained, showing their bills compared to county rates. They claimed it was county fees, but those fees go directly into board members' companies. I projected documents on the wall showing the money trail. Karen and Doug tried to shout me down, but the evidence was too clear. "There's more," I continued, pointing to the property map. "The true property lines show that your garages, built 5 years ago, actually sit on my land. I've never complained because I believe in being neighborly." The room erupted. Homeowners turned on Karen and Doug, demanding answers. "And the biggest lie of all," I said when the noise died down, "is that this is about property values or community gardens. It's about this." I projected an underground water survey map. "They want the spring under my field. In our county, whoever controls water controls everything." Karen's face went white. She hadn't known I had access to the geological surveys. As the meeting dissolved into angry shouts, Sheriff Davis finally stood up. Based on the evidence presented, I'm opening an official investigation into the Sunny Meadows HOA board. Karen lunged for the door, but two deputies blocked her way. I caught Rick's eye across the room and nodded slightly. The trap had been set. Now it was time to close it. But as I walked to my truck that night, I spotted someone watching me from the shadows. This fight wasn't over yet. It was about to get much, much worse. The courtroom fell silent as the judge banged his gavel. In light of the evidence, I find the Sunny Meadows HOA board guilty of document fraud and illegal land seizure. Karen's face turned red as she jumped up. This is ridiculous. Do you know who my husband is? The judge cut her off. Mrs. Whitfield, you're facing criminal charges and a $50,000 fine. One more word and I'll add contempt of court. Walking out, I was swarmed by news cameras. My story had gone viral overnight. How does it feel to win against the HOA that tried to steal your family farm? A reporter asked. This isn't just my victory, I answered. It's for every homeowner they've bullied with fake rules and hidden fees. A week later, flyers appeared in every Oak Ridge mailbox showing Karen's secret luxury condo purchases using HOA funds. By evening, angry neighbors were demanding a new board election. The new HOA president, Maria, knocked on my door the next day. We found out the truth about the water bill scam. We want to make things right. 3 months later, I watched neighborhood kids planting sunflowers along the property line, a living fence we designed together. Karen drove by in her moving truck, glaring as her house sold for half its value. Your grandfather would be proud, Rick said, standing beside me. You didn't just save the farm. You taught an entire community what it means to be real neighbors.